Hello, folks. Welcome to a new episode of the Sox Machine Podcast, part of the Foul Territory Network. I'm your host, Josh Nelson. And in this episode, man, what a great weekend for the Chicago White Sox. And I can just tell on social media and as well in the Sox Machine comments that everybody is pumped up with the Chicago White Sox sweeping the Detroit Tigers, an outcome that is very welcomed. I don't think anyone was really expecting. So, to help me recap what happened this weekend and also look ahead, because I think this snuck up on everybody, it's White Sox Cubs this week. Did you know that? I had to remind myself that this is happening. Not as much anticipation of the series that we saw in May, but however, both teams are playing great baseball, so it should still be a very exciting series in Chicago. And joining me is Sox Machine's managing editor, Jim Margulis. And Jim, man, what a weekend for the Chicago White Sox, sweeping the Detroit Tigers. And I know that it seems like with every passing week, we still have this hint of disbelief in our voices that this season is actually unfolding the way it has for the White Sox. And after stumbling against the Reds, and I don't blame anyone looking at these 6 games against the Tigers on the road and going to Wrigley Field to play against the Cubs, if you are concerned that maybe the White Sox would trip and be closer to 500 and the division lead would be in trouble. Instead, now listen to us. The White Sox, Jim, are 5.5 games ahead of everybody in the American League Central. So with this series sweep, is the postseason dream becoming more real in your opinion?
Oh, it should be. I invoked a magic number in the recap for the first time after Sunday's game. I'm not at the point where I think the magic number should be a daily pursuit, but over the course of the weekend, winning 3 games against the direct challenger, second place team, to remove 6 games from a magic number in one weekend in now the second half of August, that is worth noting. So now that the magic number is down to 34, that's still a long ways away. I remember from 2012, that stands out at the season where the magic number come September didn't really go down much, and it just hung on one number for far too long. And so that's why I'm not going to make this a daily feature of recaps. But I think just when you have that kind of performance, that kind of statement against the second place team, the team that was the hottest team in the American League, especially in terms of run differential, and you knock that down so dramatically, it's worth noting.
And when you take a look at the postseason odds for the White Sox, and we grabbed these from Fangraphs. So for those that are listening to the audio version of this podcast, I'll talk through it. But for those that are watching on YouTube for Fangraphs, the White Sox chances of now making the postseason are at 73%. Before opening day, Jim, it was 1%. So to look at this graph, and now Cleveland has the second best odds. They're at 26%. And that's mostly because supposedly they have the easiest schedule remaining in Major League Baseball. The Twins are at 20%. The Tigers now dropped to 19%. The Royals are at 0%. The Royals actually had the second best odds of making the postseason on opening day in the American League Central. So it's great looking at this graph and looking at the gray line and just like almost skyrocket because of what happened in this weekend, Jim, at 73% to make the playoffs. But when you look at the American League Central odds of winning the division, the White Sox are at 64%. And this is why, for me, it's becoming more real. And as a season ticket holder, podcast listeners, we have not received our playoff invoices yet. When they come, though, it's been a minute since that's happened. We laughed at it in 2022, Jim, when they came in
Mhm.
because it was just absurd that the White Sox were offering it at that time. But now we have to take it seriously. And the White Sox also added some of their lead against the Houston Astros, and they're looking at that 2 seed in the American League, which means that if you look ahead, if you're making plans, everyone, all whites, everyone that follows the White Sox, fans, media, like, we may have plans, Jim, on October 3rd. And that might be game 1 of the American League Division Series. And for all White Sox fans that were booking vacations in October, maybe you want to change your plans because you may suddenly have plans with how the White Sox have been playing. But I don't know about you, Jim, but looking at those graphs and looking at those percentages, that's where, at one part, Jim, it becomes more real for me. But at the
Mhm.
same time, I just kind of chuckle and be like, this is just how far we've come in this season from opening day to now.
It's funny when you look at the projections before the season and you see the White Sox have a 1% chance of making the postseason, or I think Pacoda might have had 2 point something percent. And you look at Pacoda has this graph that shows you all of the outcomes from the thousand simulations they run and just the spread of wins that are possible. And you see like the very front edge of that win curve being, high 80s or something like that. And you think that, okay, that's like the 1 out of 1,000, or that sliver represents like 60 out of the 1,000 that were run. And you think of everything that has to go into the White Sox having that, and it requires like a lot of over performances, we'll say,
Yeah.
just based on what the projections were. Like Miguel Vargas, like the 99th percentile projection has nothing on what he's doing right now. Tristan Peters, I'm sure he's similar. Um, and then you see like all of the failure elsewhere. Like you see the Mariners, especially. I think they're probably one of the teams most, I guess, creating the most wins available for other teams to snatch. And you have the rest of the AL West is kind of a disappointment. The Blue Jays have been a disappointment. The Orioles have been a big bummer. And all of those teams creating win vacancies for some team to come in. And the White Sox have done that with the way they played. And so it's funny when you look back at that now and you look at the standings, and on one hand, the reaction is, oh, what do these algorithms know, these projection systems know? On the other hand, it's like, well, they did account for this in a sliver of all the simulations they ran, and I guess this is what it would look like. It would look like the Royals, another team crapping the bed,
Yeah.
and maybe they weren't going to be a favorite like the Mariners were, but they certainly are leaving 20 wins on the table or something like that. Based on the pace that they're currently on, or at least I would say like maybe 15 wins. But there are so many wins for the taking that this is what it looks like when the entire American League is down and the White Sox are talented enough, explosive enough to have these outbursts that allow them to overcome what deficiencies they have.
So looking at this series again, the White Sox sweeping the Tigers. They won game 1 9-5. Game 2 they won 4-3. Game 3 they won 7-5. In the first game and the third game, they were down by 3 against the Tigers. The Tigers seem to be well in a great position to win those games against the White Sox. But it is this power in the lineup that we have just been seeking for this White Sox team, Jim. And in the second game, I give them a lot of credit. It was a key double by Colson Montgomery, a 2-run double to get them to 3 runs. And that Andrew Benintendi, being the vet, was able to pull through to have the game-winning hit for the White Sox. So they didn't hit any home runs in the second game. But in the first game, they hit 4. Miguel Vargas had 2 in that game, and Murakami had a home run in that game. And then in game 3, again, it's Vargas and Murakami. And bless your heart, Drew Romo with that big 2-run homer to cut it from a 4-1 deficit to 4-3 and spark some hope that this White Sox team can once again come back. That's the most impressive thing that I took away from this series win for the White Sox, is that even though the pitching wasn't all that great, they didn't stay in the pen, to use your analogy that you've been using many times this season, the White Sox ability to kick out. And it's really the home run power that powered as far as this series win, in my opinion, Jim.
Yeah, I mean, that makes such a huge difference when you can't get that instant offense. And I think you can supplement that by saying the outfielders, the non-fixtures in the lineup, the Tristan Peters reaching base 7 times in 3 games. You had Randall Grichuk basically being an automatic double when he came to the plate. Those
Love
kind of
that.
those kind of supplemental performances, I think, go a long way to maximize the power when it arrives. And then you have Drew Romo coming up with a big hit in the ninth spot. Chase Mydroth, when he's down seventh or lower and hitting like he's hitting, he's useful. So yeah, it's a combination, I think, of just the instant offense and the ability to all of a sudden turn the tides really quick. And then just the steadiness of the 1 through 9 to where any part of this lineup can start something. And, we saw it on Sunday with just the way they scored runs, the variety of ways they did it, like Tristan Peters doubling and scoring a couple productive groundouts. Like they needed that run after falling behind 3-0. They got it done. I'm thinking back to Sam Antonacci hustling out a double when it looked like just a routine single up the middle, and he kind of caught Javier Baez napping a little bit in center, and those 90 feet mattered scoring a run. He had Munetaka Murakami getting caught in a rundown on a contact play, but then extending the rundown long enough for the runners to backfill second and third. So you saw the power, but you also saw the White Sox, and I shouldn't say they didn't leave runs on the table, because they had went 4 for 18 with runners in scoring position one game. They went 1 for 10 on Sunday. So still not the perfect performance with runners in scoring position. I think most teams are saying that about themselves in 2026, but they create opportunities in a lot of ways to where they don't have to come up with a big hit in a given inning to turn the tides, or they don't have to have homers from Murakami and Vargas and Montgomery to make it work. Like, they can scrape by in other ways and buy time for either the hitters show up, or like it's a team really working well together. When you have that going on, and then a pretty flexible bullpen with a lot of ways to cover for needing a bullpen game, or Jose Urquidy to cover 3 1/3, or having Sean Burke at less than full power. Like, they didn't have everything in their favor, and yet they kept finding ways, one way, on one side of the ball or the other, to just make up the gap.
We'll talk more about the White Sox pitchers in a moment, because I do think that is a key topic, especially as the White Sox continue this path where they play 16 games in 16 days. But speaking of the home run power, looking at the White Sox home run leaders, Miguel Vargas and Munetaka Murakami are now tied. They both have 28 home runs. Colson Montgomery is third on the team with 26 home runs. So, Jim, unlike previous seasons, we have a spicy home run race for the White Sox. We don't have to debate who's actually going to reach 20 home runs for the White Sox. So this is a nice change of pace for the Chicago White Sox. But I do ask you, who is going to win the White Sox home run race between Murakami, Vargas, and Montgomery?
I think it's going to be Murakami. That feels a little bit chalky to me to say, and not at all spicy, but it's just so effortless when he hits them. He hits a lot that look like they're mishits, and they still carry over the wall. So when he has that kind of margin for error with regards to the quality of his contact, still generating over the fence power, I think that just gives him a huge leg up. And I think Vargas is somebody who can do it. And I'm thinking back to last year when like Lenyn Sosa won the home run title with 22, and it was just very uninspiring. Not much of a chase, you would say. But yeah, when it comes to Vargas being somebody who, like, he would have won the home run title going away last year, he certainly has the ability to get on heaters and really rip the ball. But I think he's still somebody he needs his best contact to get over the fence. He's just making his best contact more often, and that helps him a lot. But I think just Murakami, his ability to mishit the ball, or just the way his swing is angled is such that creates so much backspin that more fly balls of his get over the fence than I think most hitters in general, and most power hitters especially.
Especially his ability now to go opposite field. Like, I think that's the difference between Murakami, Vargas, and Colson Montgomery. Montgomery and Vargas, they need to pull the ball. But as we have seen recently from Murakami, he's starting to demonstrate, Jim, that opposite field power, being able to go to left field with his home runs. So I'll give you Murakami. I'm going to take Vargas. I feel like Vargas, he loves hitting at Wrigley Field. He had a huge series last year in Wrigley Field. To me, it's just so heartwarming because we could see 30+ home run hitters in this lineup, Jim. Like I feel like Colson Montgomery is going to get to 30. I feel like Vargas and Murakami are both going to get to 35 homers. Murakami to get to 35 homers after missing quite a bit of time with this hamstring issue. Very impressive. But man, I've been asking for this. I think a lot of White Sox fans have been asking for this because despite what Ozzie Guillen says, his best teams were the ones that put the ball in the seats. They hit more than 200 home runs. And I feel like the White Sox finally have that right mixture because, I mean, Andrew Benintendi has 12, Chase Mydroth has 12, and they're starting to get some more home runs, especially from the role players like Drew Romo and Tristan Peters. I feel like the White Sox are going to get to that 200 home run milestone this season. And it's a big reason why they have a comfortable lead now in the American League Central. But let us know in the comments section who your, I guess, pick to click is and who's going to win the White Sox home run race between Miguel Vargas, Munetaka Murakami, and Colson Montgomery. But we're going to take a quick break for a word from our sponsors. But coming up next on the Sox Machine podcast, we'll be talking about the White Sox pitching staff. Is Hagen Smith the White Sox X factor now in the bullpen, and preview White Sox versus Cubs next on the Sox Machine podcast.
SeatGeek is the official ticket marketplace for Major League Baseball, and anytime you want to go to a game, you should go to SeatGeek. I used to call the director of team travel. I used to call the traveling secretary, whatever they want to be called, KP, to try to get a seat. But on SeatGeek, I can pick my own seat, and I can pick where I want to sit instead of being told where to sit.
Yeah, it's a great option. And summer is coming to an end here soon. I'm going out and finding all the day games possible, all the warm weather cities, so I could stay in this tank top. I can watch very competitive baseball. As the calendar turns into fall, I want to make sure that I get the most out of this tank top and warm weather. And SeatGeek is where I would go and get my seats.
You can use code Territory10 for 10% off your next set of MLB tickets at SeatGeek. That's 10% off MLB tickets with promo code Territory10. Make sure you click the link in the description to download the app and have the code automatically added to your account so you can use it later.
Howard, my dad was T-boned by a utility vehicle and is in surgery now. What should I do?
I'm sorry to hear about that. It's really great that you're getting him the medical care and treatment that he needs right now. These are three important things that I think you need to know. Injuries are unexpected and turn lives upside down. I'm Howard Ankin, and I'm here to help. If you or a loved one have been hurt at work or in a car, truck, or rideshare accident, call 312-6-million. Injury law made personal. That's Ankin Law.
Welcome back to the Sox Machine podcast. Now we kind of shift gears. We talked about the White Sox offense really helping out in their series sweep against Detroit. Let's talk about the state of the White Sox pitching staff because Davis Martin is on the injured list because of his blister. He's going to be out a few more weeks. Earliest that he'll be returning as at the end of August for that series up in Minneapolis against the Minnesota Twins. And Jose Urquidy might be an option to start some games. It really sounded iffy, Jim, from Will Venable after Sunday's win on what's going to happen with the White Sox pitching staff. So this is what I have on paper, what their starting rotation is at the moment. Anthony Kay, because he starts before Sean Burke, even though we all agree that Sean Burke is the number one starter for the White Sox right now. Sean Burke and Luis Castillo, question mark. Like, I don't know who I fill in for those question marks for the White Sox. So in your opinion, what is the White Sox current starting rotation?
I think you can maybe extend that to Jose Urquidy right now.
Okay.
They phrase it as a bullpen game, but it really was the classic kind of opener bulk boy, and Urquidy was the bulk boy. And I think he and like Jonathan Cannon, and I think they're kind of the same kind of guy to where, and Fetty too, to that regard of just, you can hope that they get their lineup twice, and then after that, anything is a bonus. But hopefully, they have an opener beforehand who doesn't take away from their high leverage pile later in the game. And so you're talking about getting through 5 innings, or you have your bullpen entirely rested and like Sean Newcomb ready to go with multiple innings afterwards. But I would guess it's Urquidy and Fetty. It just, I think having those two guys being kind of so similar in terms of not having overwhelming fastballs, needing a lot of secondary stuff to get by. Fetty is, I think, vulnerable against lefties, whereas Urquidy really has to use his changeup against righties more than, and this is me watching him, a couple times, once in Charlotte, once here, but just, he's using his changeup a lot against righties. And when it works, it's fine. When it doesn't work, you think like, oh, that's never going to work because of just the way the ball kind of tails into the hitter's bat path. And so when he gets taken deep on a changeup, you think, of course he would. And he's just trying to get by with two good pitches, basically. And he has to throw them no matter what, even if the handedness doesn't make sense. So I think he makes me, well, I guess they both make me nervous because Fetty just, I think he got his role kind of messed with a little bit. And we'll see if he can regain normalcy or what he had established before getting sent down. But I think that's probably it right now. David Sandlin looked good his last time out. Not sure about Noah Schultz. They have some options, but I think, there's going to be 3 starters, probably, Urquidy with an opener. I just don't know if you can get by with Fetty and Urquidy because that's just a lot of maintenance for one spot and needing to line up a lot of arms to make sure it goes right. So I would hope by like the next turn through the rotation that you get a little bit more clarity based on just only having one of those guys require assistance, whether it's before or after, having to earmark a reliever to try to complete 5 or 6.
Would they consider bringing back Sandlin or Noah Schultz before this weekend? Because it's been more than a week since they were both optioned.
Yeah, I mean, Sandlin seems like he might be closer. He just pitched Saturday, I believe. So, like, he's probably going to be on turn before it happens. Also, like Schultz, they cut him off after 4 innings. So, I wonder if they just have faith that he can be full power with the way his knee is kind of come in and out and the way his effectiveness is kind of waned. I think Sandlin is the better bet for having his best, most powerful stuff. It's just a matter of can he sustain it, more than 3 innings before his command kind of loosens on him and he kind of starts making his own trouble. So I think I would maybe go Sandlin first before Schultz. Either way, it's I think you have 2 options. You have the prospects with in-game durability issues with Sandlin and Schultz. Then you have the Urquidy, Fetty. I'd throw Jonathan Cannon onto this pile as well. Shane Smith as well. Having these guys who just, they go 4, but then they just either have trouble with efficiency or they have trouble with just running out of pitches by the time a lineup sees them 3 times. And so you really need to have an idea either before or after to try to get them through like a normal starter's workload.
I can hear podcasters in the background, Jim, in their cars or on the train or bus mentioning Drew Thorpe. Is he close to being ready to throw in the majors?
Yeah, I think he's probably worth a start. So yeah, I would put him in the Sandlin pile of just through 5 innings with relative ease the last time out. He's up to like 70 pitches. So if he were efficient, sure, like give him a look. It's worth seeing what his stuff looks like at some point this season before going into the winter to understand what he might have to offer, what he might have to work on. I'm a little bit skeptical that he's going to look meaningfully different from a couple years ago, just because the velocity is still like closer to 90 than 92. And he's getting he has to throw a whole lot of change ups to get by. And it's a really good change up. So I don't want to say like he shouldn't rely on his best pitch because it's one of the, it might be the best single pitch on the White Sox pitching staff in terms of just how much he can get out of it going to it over and over again. It's just that when you don't have, I guess, the full revitalization of his velocity and you have a slider and cutter that had problems blending into each other when we saw him last in the majors, and based on StatCast, it still kind of looks like that's the same case. Those might be reasons to think that the success that he's had in a pretty smooth ramp up from the minors would transfer over pretty smoothly. But yeah, I think by the time that spot comes around, like maybe one more start in Charlotte, but if it looks anything like his last one, then sure, throw him in there, see what it looks like. Nothing to lose.
It's just really tough right now for Will Venable, and Zach Bove, the pitching coach of the White Sox, to be working with a starting rotation with just 3 starters. We're going to be previewing this upcoming series between the White Sox and Cubs, but it looks like it's Luis Castillo on Monday and back-to-back bullpen games for the White Sox. Like, that's tough. That's a tough way to live.
I will say, though, like watching Venable at Comerica Park, where I'm not sure what the seating situation is there because they always show him close up, but he's always got like his feet up on the concrete and his elbows are on his knees, and he just looks, even if the White Sox are trailing by 3 or winning by 5, like he has the same position each time. And whether he's has a starter who's cruising or throwing well enough, or whether he's got Jose Urquidy and he needs 2 1/3 inning from Sean Newcomb, and he's got to use Grant Taylor on back-to-back games, like he looks very comfortable being uncomfortable in terms of his pitching selections. And it's a stark contrast to Rick Renteria in Oakland at the Coliseum, bent over at the waist, hands on his knees, praying for somebody to give him a clean inning. In terms of body language from a manager, if he is either panicking or just truly throwing stuff against the wall to seeing what sticks, he doesn't give it away. And I think that's something, like, it reminds me of one time I was on a flight that you needed to assume the position on landing because there was like a flat tire in the landing gear. And so you had to but I was watching the flight attendants, and they had game faces, or like they look completely relaxed. It's like, I have no control over the situation. I'm going to take their cue. They look, I'm reading their faces. I'm not seeing any tension. I'm not, they're just kind of walking up and down the aisle, doing the last, trash checks and everything like that. So it's like, if they're not freaking out, I'm not going to freak out. And whether they were calm and just had reassurances that having the fire truck on the runway was completely precautionary, or whether they were saying, like, I don't know what's going to happen. They didn't give it away. And so Venable reminds me of that a little bit in terms of his body language being, if he is panicking, maybe it's the glasses too, the dark sunglasses doing work, but you don't see it.
Hides the fear.
Yeah.
So while we have questions about the White Sox starting pitching staff, we have seen the White Sox, especially Will Venable lately, Jim, be comfortable having like Grant Taylor and Sean Newcomb try these multiple inning save opportunities. Should we expect this moving forward for the White Sox, in which Taylor's coming in maybe with 2 outs of the 7th inning, and he's just not trying to get that last out in the 7th and try to pitch a clean 8th? He's going to try to take it all the way as far as he can. What do you think about as far as these multiple inning save opportunities for Taylor and Newcomb?
I think in a big series like this one, where you can you can add to your direct challengers loss column with these wins. Like, I think we saw them on Friday and Saturday. I think Friday especially is like, win the game. No matter what, we just got to win this game. We're in position to do it. We're going to have Grant Taylor in, even though like we might have the leverage or we might have a low enough leverage or enough cushion to try to get an inning from Trevor Richards. He didn't do that. He went with Grant Taylor when he needed to. And then he got that win put in his pocket, and locked in that he was going to be coming out of Comerica Park with the series, or with the division lead after the series, no matter what. And you saw the second game, had another chance to win. Grant Taylor only threw 18 pitches, even though it was 1 2/3 innings. Sure, back-to-back games, and he did that again, and he got the series win out of it. And I think in these situations, you are going to see more aggressive bullpen deployment, and I think Sean Newcomb as well. I think there are diminishing returns. You see this especially in the postseason when you try to stretch relievers out, or you try to get them to pitch 4 times in 5 games. You see either the stuff waning or the opponents getting a handle, or kind of like a traject machine come to life, like just seeing the reps in front of you so many times that hitters can get a beat on it, to where I think if he can avoid it in situations where he's looking at the scoreboard and sees like, okay, Detroit or Cleveland lost, I can try to steal an inning with Trevor Richards. I think is probably that, or maybe Huascar Brazoban too is in this bucket of relievers who are not somebody you necessarily trust in a 1-run game, but have enough veteran know-how to, hand them the ball, and if they fail, it's their failure, not Venables. So I think maybe how I would see it going down over the next 3-4 weeks. If he can get by without it, I think he will. But I think if he needs a win, or if a win would either it's dealing a division rival a blow or just having a chance to get a win when you look at your next day's pitching situation, think like that's not going to be. We're not counting on a win out of that one. Let's get this one no matter what. I think that's probably how you're going to see him pursue these reliever situations aggressively. I think he's going to try to avoid wearing down any one reliever if he can avoid it. But yeah, I think if it comes last week of the season and it's neck and neck, then yeah, I think it will be just going with your best reliever no matter what and pushing him to the point of failure the way you see it in the postseason.
Yeah, I just I was wondering, like in the first game, like with Jordan Hicks, like maybe I would have went to Jordan Hicks before going to Grant Taylor, because I think everyone should be a little bit more confident when Jordan Hicks is entering the game, Jim, with the way that he has been throwing. I think he's merited some confidence in his ability to get out of a medium or high leverage situation for the White Sox. But then again, it's kind of nice to have Jordan Hicks in your back pocket, Jim, if you have to go into extra innings, because he's such a tough pitcher to deal with. Even though you have a runner on second base, I can't imagine how fun it would be trying to lay down a bunt against Jordan Hicks. But I guess I'm with you. Like, I don't know if it's the best idea, but I am expecting more multi-inning opportunities for Grant Taylor and Sean Newcomb, maybe even trying to get one time through the order. And if they're not walking anyone and the opposing team can't hit them, sure, go for it. Try to get that 3-inning save. And
and I think Hicks, like, I maybe would have gone to him before Taylor, but then again, he was fresh for a 1 2/3 innings on Saturday. So like it's a case where in a single game, and you have if you're worried about usage, then I think Hicks is maybe not interchangeable with Taylor, but I think he's maybe one notch down to where if he loses a 1-run lead in the 8th inning, you're surprised. And I think that's how I would judge it. But yeah, when you have Taylor going and then you have you think you're going to be dealing with a shorter start the next day, or you think you're going to need somebody to cover the 6th and 7th innings, then having a fresh Hicks there to be able to go beyond 1 inning, he's not maybe the kind of length weapon that Sean Newcomb is. And I think Taylor might have a little bit longer of a history of throwing 2 innings of relief as well. But I think Hicks, based on both the number of games where he's at least started a 2nd inning this year, and also his history as a starter, that now that he's in this form where he's throwing 4-seamers and 2-seamers and getting strikeouts and hitting 102, that, if he comes back in the 2nd inning and he's still hitting triple digits, then push him 2 innings and try to spare Newcomb or Taylor or anybody else an inning to where you might be able to use them the next day, especially when the rotation is as uncertain as it is.
And Brian Hudson has been throwing better. He threw better in this series than he did against the Reds. Now, this brings up who I think might be the X factor now in the White Sox bullpen. And this has been the Hagen Smith experience. Jim, he hasn't allowed a run. He hasn't even allowed a hit in 4 2/3 innings. You'd be thinking, we found our future closer. Except, along with his 7 strikeouts, which is awesome, 6 walks. Like, it is. I've been listening to the radio broadcast more because I want, with the whole Colson Montgomery situation, his struggles, I wanted to get Darren Jackson's perspective, Jim, of Montgomery's plate approach, just to get that additional insight from a former major league hitter on what is been the issue for Colson Montgomery. But listening to Len and DJ describe the Hagen Smith experience, and it's funny, it's one of our favorite baseball podcasts, but yeah, this is the definition of effectively wild. You can't hit him. He's going to walk you, but you can't hit him right now. So is he going to be the White Sox X factor in their bullpen?
Could be, especially in games that he can, he's picked up 2 wins in 3 games. Like, he's been in these situations where it's maybe not classic high leverage, but it's at a point where the game can tilt. And I think he's he's not somebody that you want to throw in those situations if you don't have to. I think he's a rookie still, even though he's a very, we'll call it dynamic, for lack of a better word, in terms of just how eventful and uh, highs and lows of a single inning can be. That I think if you try to do that every single time, where 6 inning tie game, Hagen Smith for 1+ innings, you're maybe putting him in a position to fail, or putting him in a position where like the walks could bite him, and then you're saying, well, yeah, you walked 1.5 guys an inning. Why wouldn't that explode on him at some point? So I do think you have to protect him at some point, but in the situation where you have 2 spots uncertain, where the relievers have to cover 5th, 6th innings, yeah, he's probably a pretty good candidate for a front end of the bullpen. Like if you have like Taylor and Newcomb and Hudson and Hicks as your options higher up on the leverage ladder, then you're talking about like the front half of your bullpen. And like if Hagen Smith is in the front half of your bullpen, then yeah, he's probably going to be getting those like 5th, 6th inning outings, and it's not a terrible choice. So, and he's also got enough history in terms of like going multiple innings, even starting, that if he does make that first inning look easy, like if he has his command on point and he gets through 1 inning and 2 strikeouts on 12 pitches, then yeah, a second inning is a no-brainer. So I do think he's next factor in the sense that, maybe he's not going to be trusted in high leverage situations. Like he's not going to be rivaling Taylor for saves in the 9th inning, but I do think he's somebody who can affect games earlier because of just how many short starts or bullpen games or opener situations the White Sox have to deal with.
I would not bring him into an inning where there's runners on first and second and nobody out. I would try to bring him in clean innings. But the Hagen Smith experience has been wild. It's not for the faint of heart, by no imagination, but the fact that he is struck out half the batters that he's faced, or half of his outs have been resulted in strikeouts. It's clearly there. Like we've been saying for a long time, the stuff that Hagen Smith has is very difficult to square up. That's not the problem. The problem is the control and command of his stuff. But I mean, if he can come in and he's an unhittable reliever and the other team's game plan is we're just going to wait him out until he walks us, that's a dangerous game plan too for the opposing team. Try to having to walk your way to score a run. No team has yet to do that against Hagen Smith. Again, no hits and no runs so far in his major league career. Pretty impressive stuff. Jim and I are going to take a quick break for one last word from our sponsors. But coming up after the break, we're going to be previewing this week's White Sox vs. Cubs series next on the Sox Machine Podcast.
For the families out there looking for a new path to help your child succeed, take a look at K-12 Powered Schools. K-12 offers tuition-free accredited online public education for students in kindergarten through 12th grade. It's all in a setting that works for your family. And K-12 has been around. They've been a leader in online education for over 25 years, serving over 3 million families with flexible education options tailored to each child's needs, interests, and goals for the future. K-12's dedicated teachers are trained in virtual instruction, and they provide real-time support. Hey, we've heard Todd Father on here talk about how his kids have gone through homeschooling, and it's really helped them for a family that is very much on the move during his playing career. So you can see how K-12 Powered Schools can help unlock your child's full potential. Enroll online today at k12.com/FOUL. That's the letter K, the number 12.com/FOUL. K12.com/FOUL.
Welcome back to the Sox Machine Podcast. The White Sox now play 3 games at Wrigley Field against the Chicago Cubs. The Cubs are 72-53 this season. They lost their last 2 games against the St. Louis Cardinals, but they are 6-4 in their last 10. They've been very good at Wrigley Field this year. They are 36-26. Your pitching probables for this series: Monday and Tuesday are 7:05 p.m. Central Time starts. It'll be Shota Imanaga for the Chicago Cubs against Luis Castillo on Monday night. Tuesday night, this game is a national broadcast on TBS. It'd be Kevin Gausman for the Toronto Blue Jays, and we'll find out later and who the White Sox are at least going to open that game on Tuesday. Wednesday is getaway day. This is a 1:20 p.m. Central Time start. The Cubs are going to throw out Clay Holmes. And again, we'll find out what the White Sox want to do on the pitching side. That's the big storyline for the Chicago White Sox in this series against the Chicago Cubs, is exactly who is going to be pitching in this series. Some bad news for the Chicago Cubs. Dansby Swanson has been put on the injured list with an oblique issue. So be interested to see what the Cubs do at the shortstop position. But in this series, Jim, there's like 2 points that I really want to touch on. One, we'll see what Kevin Gausman and Clay Holmes can provide on the mound from a starting pitching side. But watching the highlights, especially, did you see Joshua Baez? Like, just the highlights, like, everybody stop what you're doing, put us on pause, go watch those 3 home runs. That dude has got power. There has just been this growing fear about this Cubs bullpen. And we saw it in May. The White Sox were able to take advantage of it. If Mother Nature cooperates, I have a feeling this is going to be a high scoring series, and maybe this will be a cold take. The Cubs are averaging 5.16 runs per game. The White Sox are averaging 4.82 runs per game. So offenses are pretty good, and both of these teams are top 10 in home runs. Again, Mother Nature has to cooperate, but I have a feeling, Jim, this could be a pretty high scoring series again.
Yeah, it could be. When you look at the Cubs, like, the lineup is strong 1 through 9, or at least it's deep. Like, you don't maybe have, I guess, with Bregman hitting the way he's been hitting recently, that's, a centerpiece hitter, but you don't have maybe the classic middle of the order masher. I think, PCA is pretty much there. The strikeouts maybe a little bit elevated to where you feel like you can pitch to him. But it's just so deep. And it's, again, one of those lineups we talk about the White Sox having when they're functioning, to where they can start a rally from anywhere, that you don't feel like any inning is easy, that you don't feel like there's a soft patch. Like, when Sir Anthony Dominguez was on the White Sox and you're looking for pockets to put him in, to where I can maybe face this 6, 7, 8 and not worry about walking them. Like, the Cubs really don't offer that kind of pocket. Maybe with handedness a little bit, you can kind of mix and match. But in terms of plate discipline and the ability to all of a sudden lead off double and you're in trouble, that lineup is talented in that regard. So I think, it could be just between the White Sox power, if their top end power shows up at Wrigley, and we'll see what the wind is doing there too, because like that can affect whether it's a pitching park
Big time
or hitting park. But like, you can see, like, if the wind is favorable, or at least not killing them, and the White Sox top end power shows up, and then you have the Cubs going 1 through 9, it could feel, just even if it's not like high scoring, it can just feel tiring if you're following along pitch to pitch with whatever pitching staff you have an interest in.
First team to 9 runs wins. It kind of feels that way. The Cubs lineup, to Jim's point, already have 5 hitters with 15 or more home runs. The next home run by Michael Busch will give the Cubs 6 hitters with 15 or more home runs. So pretty impressive lineups for both teams as far as home run power is concerned. My second point, I feel like in the city of Chicago, there's a lot going on this weekend. The Chicago Bears had their first preseason game, Jim. The Air and Water Show was this weekend in Chicago. And of course, Cubs versus Cardinals this weekend. There was a lot going on in Chicago. I feel like this series has snuck up on people in the city. And I'm thinking it's because it's the Monday through Wednesday series. So here's my hot take for future scheduling when it comes to the White Sox and Cubs. I feel this series should always be on the weekend. I think that is most advantageous as far as to draw up as much excitement as possible in Chicago. There should be, in my opinion, more excitement and more attention to what's going to be happening these next 3 days, because both teams are playing excellent baseball. Right now, both teams could be making into the postseason. This could be an incredibly fun late September, early October in Chicago, with the Bears playing football and the Bulls and Blackhawks about to start their seasons, and the White Sox and Cubs are in the playoffs. Like, the buzz of this city in the summer is just going to be extended into fall. And that makes me really hyped up. But I don't know about you being outside of Chicago, but it just feels like there's not as much excitement heading into this series as we saw earlier in the year in May. And I think that's because that series in May was over the weekend.
Yeah, I think weekend has a lot to do with it. I wonder too, with the White Sox just playing the Tigers and that being so important. Like, you can't overlook a series against Detroit, even if the Cubs are on deck,
Sure.
because those 3 games matter so much. If you get swept by the Tigers, you're in second place. So I think that had a hand in it too, of just already having a measuring stick series in front of the Cubs. The Cubs, are its own context and own bragging rights, but this series against Detroit was just so crucial for creating a cushion, allowing the White Sox to try to figure out the rotation, buy them some time. That, by the time the Cubs show up, it is a big series, but it also maybe lays bare a bit to the idea that they are not direct rivals. They're city rivals in terms of consuming baseball in Chicago. They are direct competitors, but in terms of getting to the postseason, both teams are. When you have a series against the Tigers right in front saying, like, you got to win these 3 games, or you got to avoid losing all these 3 games, you're in second place and perhaps out of the postseason picture, depending on what the rest of the American League does, it becomes a little bit more, maybe not trivial, because these games matter too, the standings, but you can definitely tell they're a secondary concern when it comes to making the postseason.
Yeah, it's National League week for the White Sox. It's 3 at Wrigley against the Cubs. Then they have that makeup on Thursday against the Atlanta Braves. And then they host the New York Mets this upcoming weekend. And the Mets have been playing a lot better baseball as of late, before the Texas Rangers come into town. And then the White Sox have a day off finally before they head up to Minneapolis, which is a key series. But even though there wasn't as much anticipation into this series as it was in May, maybe things will radically change on Monday night when the White Sox and Cubs take each other on. If the White Sox win this series, they win the Crosstown Cup. I wasn't expecting that this season. So maybe, even though things are a little quiet now, it could easily go from 0 to 60 real fast between the White Sox and the Cubs.
Do you think anybody's going to use the term World Series preview earnestly?
No, because I'm going to be on The Score at 1:00 on Monday, podcast listeners. So you can listen to that, of course, on 104.3 FM or 670 AM, or you can watch The Score's Twitch stream when I'm on the radio station. And I don't think anyone's going to use that seriously, Jim, because on the North Side, I think that they are doubting the White Sox. Or I guess the North Side perspective is, I wish the Cubs were in the American League, right? Because honestly, the Cubs would be maybe the best team in the American League, Jim. They would be the number 1 seed, where as of right now, they're trying to stay ahead of the Phillies so they could be the 4th seed and hosting the Phillies in that wild card round, which is a very tough 3-game series for the Chicago Cubs. So that's like their
It would be the
concern.
2nd seed, I guess, behind the Rays.
Behind the Rays.
Yeah.
I think if the Cubs swap places with the White Sox, I think the Cubs would find a way to have a better record than the Rays if they were more
maybe.
games against the American League. I feel like the Cubs are better than the Rays. So that's maybe another hot take for me, but that's just how I feel.
Fair enough.
So I think that in the Chicago, where it's like, people in the North Side still don't know what to make of the White Sox, where from a White Sox perspective is, I'm glad the team's in the American League. Don't have to worry about the Brewers. Don't have to worry about the Dodgers or the Braves or the Phillies. Like, there's some really, really strong teams. Like, both teams have quite the, I don't want to continue using the word gauntlet, but they got a tough road to get through in the postseason to reach the World Series, with the White Sox still defying expectations, and the Cubs with just how tough the National League is. So earnestly, no. If anyone does that, I think it's just your standard sports talk radio style, if that makes sense, Jim.
Yeah, no, it would be just the ramifications of a White Sox Cubs World Series. So when you see how charged these are, and we'll see, like, with both these teams, like in postseason position, it's rare to see them have this kind of stakes or have these aspirations, legitimate aspirations, so close. You're not seeing these teams usually contending in late August, playing each other head to head.
Yeah,
I am
true.
curious to like what the fight situation is going to be at Wrigley or around the park. Just maybe not. Like sometimes these weekday series have a way of muting the
They
behavior
do.
just because you don't have the all day tailgating, especially a day game on a Wednesday. But in terms of like a postseason preview, I think like this is probably the closest to kind of understanding what the crowd looks like, how charged the atmosphere is when both teams are good and both teams are playing for more than just trying to get the temporary crosstown cup bragging rights that normally the only things riding on these games.
The White Sox are going to be hyped. So I know the Cubs are the more veteran team and they're more even keeled. But this White Sox team will be hyped for these games at Wrigley Field. So it should be a fun 3-game series between the White Sox and the Cubs. And of course, we'll be recapping all these games on SoxMachine.com. So follow along with us. And then we'll have the midweek podcast episode recapping what happened between the White Sox and Cubs, and then look ahead to this upcoming 4-game weekend. I'm just going to call it the makeup game against Atlanta and then the 3 games against the New York Mets. But that will do it for this episode of the Sox Machine Podcast. Thank you guys so much for watching and listening. If you just discovered the Sox Machine Podcast and you want to subscribe to the audio version of the show, you can subscribe to the Sox Machine Podcast wherever you listen to podcasts, such as Spotify and Apple Music. But this is also a video show. So now you could watch us on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/Sox Machine. If you do watch the YouTube channel, but you haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel yet, please do so, as we now have the technology for more reliable live streaming. So we'll be live streaming more often in the upcoming weeks as the games, the moments get bigger for the Chicago White Sox, and then you'll be notified of our new videos. So again, go to youtube.com/Sox Machine. You can follow us on social media. We're on all the platforms at Sox Machine. You can follow me at SoxMachine_Josh. And for those that still are watching the YouTube, yes, you could still follow James Fegan at JR Fegan, as he left us and moved over to the Sun Times, but he'll be writing about the White Sox soon enough, and I'll update that graphic at a later time. But if you really want to help out Sox Machine, as we make some adjustments here on our side to cover the rest of this 2026 season and make plans for covering the postseason, you can sign up to become a Sox Machine subscriber at SoxMachine.com/products. We still have our sale in which your first month is around 53 cents based on the White Sox winning percentage. And then after that, it's $5 a month. We also have some spots open at our Veterans Committee. We've gotten a couple of emails of people inquiring to join our VC, as we're going to be leaning on our Veterans Committee to give us suggestions and ideas as well on how we can shape as far as the structure of Sox Machine as a media entity and the ways that we can cover this White Sox team, not just for the rest of this 2026 season, but the 2027 season and beyond. So if you really enjoy our work, and thank you to everyone in the comments section in recent days of how much that they appreciate what we do at Sox Machine and that they're so grateful being part of the community. If you want to be part of that, again, go to SoxMachine.com/products and sign up today. The Sox Machine Podcast is a production of SoxMachine.com. You're for all things Chicago White Sox baseball and part of the Foul Territory Network. Alongside Jim Margulis, I'm Josh Nelson. Thanks for watching and listening.